Welcome to the Art of Arms podcast, where we discuss the intricacies of the Kunst des Fechtens tradition and reflect upon the irony that while we commit ourselves to the art of defense, in the end there is no escaping our inevitable demise at the hands of a bleak and uncaring universe.
Welcome to the Art Arms podcast. Today's guest is Joeli Takala from Finland. Joeli, how are you doing?
Oh, just fine. Having an awesome Friday here.
Welcome, Joeli.
Hi. This came a bit out of the bushes for me, but I have been preparing myself for weird HEMA antics. Basically, since I started, nothing out of the ordinary.
Yeah, well, we're honored to have you on here. We're excited to hear about your research and the things that you found.
Likewise. This is, and by the way, awesome work with your podcast. I've been looking into it a bit, and I'm just flabbergasted how in depth you have been going with 16th century Italian martial culture and the history of warfare and the individuals. It's just
all the cool stuff in history is at the low level. It's like
it is.
Yeah,
it is.
Screw the kings and the popes. We want to know about the dudes who had the swords and what they were up to.
Mm-hmm.
What things look like at that level. Yeah.
Yeah. So, Joeli, why don't you tell us a little bit about your martial arts background and how you got started in HEMA?
Oh yeah. My martial arts pretty much started with waving swords. Swords at my friends, and it's still there, so it hasn't progressed much. I suppose I was history buff when I was a kid, and early 19s already. We were making all these swords and stuff. I suppose if I remember the story right, we were a bit mad at the local medieval castle guide for showing us a sword during a school trip, and it was a long sword. I remember still. It's been stolen actually later on. But the museum guide was claiming that these were cumbersome weapons and couldn't really be used in an efficient manner, and probably was used for executions and stuff like that. And we were like, okay. So we went home, and for the next summer we took our ice hockey gear, because with Finns, of course, you're a teenager, you have ice hockey gear, and we made some wooden long swords and stuff, and started bashing the sweat out of each other, and it kind of stayed like that then for a while. We found it was dangerous and exhilarating, and but it got us into stage fighting later on when we were doing school projects, and then through the stage fighting people and the community, I got introduced to this new concept of HEMA, because Guy Windsor was opening his school of European swordsmanship at Helsinki. So I entered there, and that's if you think of the early 2000s and having a set space and a professional instructor and stuff like that. So hell yeah, I stayed there, and I was then helping Guy run his day-to-day.
Can you imagine how cool it must have been, Josh, to go on a field trip to a castle and there was a sword there?
No.
And your takeaway was you were bummed because you thought this guy was BSing you about the utility of the sword. Our field trips are like, here's a farm that was 100 years old. Oh, look what they used to open cans. That is so cool, man.
Yeah, well, we have a bit of a thousand-year history as a no man's land between the Kingdom of Sweden and the Russian Empire. So there was still this kind of things can be found here. And this was before there was a social internet, basically. So it was basically just a convoluted version of, oh wait, somebody is wrong in the museum. I must check this out. These days I would be just angry at the Facebook at somebody. But yeah, I have to mention that even though Guy pretty much got me set up by providing me with like a framework and education for how to run a martial arts school and how to conduct training, it was actually then my friend and my like the closest teacher Ilkka who taught me to read basically anew. So it's just sit and you read. You don't understand.
We've heard of this Ilka before.
But yeah, we owe him everything.
Yeah, he is quite something, and yeah, so then we just read and trained together. Usually, like after the class, have a couple of hours of training and then go home by midnight, kind of a thing, and then I got the idea that the books are actually pretty cool, and then started doing my own research by that example. But I wouldn't touch the Bolognese because I was looking at it closely, that it was awful amount of work, and the problem was that I had already like 7 years of German in the high school and senior high school and university. So then at one point then I was just realizing that I will have one language less to learn if I pick just German, and as long as I could stay away from Latin, it would be awesome. But then something strange happened. Then like HIMA was still pretty new, and I got basically recruited to the National Opera of Finland to act as a stage fighter for the big stage, and then later on do some choreographies there. And it kind of got me sidetracked to stage fighting for a long while.
Interesting.
That's amazing.
I guess it's like
so
when
cool.
you like, there's not that many people in Finland, so if you're like if you're one of the sword guys, there's just not that many of you, right?
Oh yeah. Then I did emphasis on that a bit because it would already get me to touch, for example, with the stage fighting professor of the National Theatre Academy of Finland, who was trying to get his own first PhD research on Ridolfo Capoferro out in 1980s, but then something happened and he had to drop it later on for work, and he did finish his PhD with a different thesis later on. But so I already got in touch with people who were actually doing this thing for reals, and that's quite something. Cool. And then of course Ilkka taking me all over Europe for field trips every summer basically, and we would go visit these clubs where he was invited to. And then one of these clubs was this pretty big, like 300 person, very well networked school in Hungary. So I started then just going there out of the habit every year until I realized that I had completed their training and regime basically, and for a teacher/researcher, and that was really cool because they would offer that kind of education there, and their like end examinations are out of this world. You wouldn't believe what they made us do. It was like completely unreal. But it set a really good bar that you can actually do this thing if you just let yourself to like get immersed with the sources and fence and train. And then that enabled me to like bit by bit bring the knowledge of KDF to Finland, and so on, and that was really fruitful then.
That's incredible. So we can say you're Bolognese by proxy, right?
Oh yeah. I mean all the attitude and yeah, like these discussions that, well, what is the similarities between like Langesmesse and Anonimo Bolognese, and we start looking at that a bit, and then realize that that's a silly place. Let's not go there if we don't want to spend like years and years on subject. We should basically take one of the biggest Italian early sources, and then you take the biggest late medieval source of one weapon, and let's cross compare that. Well, it doesn't make sense. But yeah, then something happened later on. I got like awful injuries and stuff from wrestling tournaments and stuff, and I realized I need to get back to my own old university jobs and habits, and I got headhunted in the National Library of Finland. I'm working there, and it's been pretty sweet because then I have a good access for both to like history researchers and docents.
Yeah.
Back here.
Yeah, that would be pretty sweet.
Yeah, but they are really nice people. Really nice people. Like, and then of course the access to like digitized. Like,
Yeah. You get to
digitized
spend your day around books, man. I would love to work in a library.
I'm kind of like by proxy, by like couple of floors underneath. I'm kind of sitting on some unique Italian fencing treatises actually that don't exist.
Oh, really?
Oh,
Like what?
interesting.
What?
Which
Did I mention
ones?
something? Oh well, it's just nothing. It's just from the time Fabres was teaching at Denmark.
Okay.
So
Oh.
yeah. So I mean these do exist, like these handwritten like 600 page or so books.
Are they in
Wow.
Italian or in Danish?
No. That I think that's German.
They're in German. Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
Some of them
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
like
'cause-
the Chauffeur Häusle that tracks down from Fabris is in German. Some of the Fabris is also translated to German. So there's like this is basic European stuff that you have these like traces of history here and there. I don't think they are actually that important for HEMA at this point anymore because we have lots of material and they are a bit repetitive.
Got it. So they don't explore really. They're mostly derivative from Fabris rather than exploring new terrain.
Yeah. And sometimes the derivatives, if they differ, they just understood something wrong. Like I remember this case of running into Swedish copy of De Radas Destreza book. It was awful shit because it was mixing and matching Italian and Spanish and like introducing concept of tempo to destreza in Swedish, in like 18th century Swedish. And I was just reading this like, what the hell? If I want this kind of stuff, I don't know. Should well, I better say nothing. Nothing
Got
from
it.
nothing
You
bad.
can't say something nice. Don't say anything at all.
Yeah. But you do see that not all of the stuff is gold nuggets.
There's some turds out there too.
Yeah. So, an interesting note about Denmark is that Annibale Bentivoglio was actually knighted by Christian the First of Denmark.
Cool.
So there's a Bolognese connection that goes back to the Kingdom of Denmark.
Oh, that's really cool. Denmark was pretty big at that time, like population-wise and so on. So, but there must have been some very specific diplomacy going on there.
Yeah, it's a weird. You have like the son of a Signore of Bologna getting knighted by the King of Denmark.
Yeah, there's a story there. I have a feeling.
There is.
It's
Definitely
like
gotta be a
opposite
story
side
there.
of Europe.
Right.
But it doesn't happen by accident. But like they sometimes say, when you concentrate on personal stories in history, and now I'm segueing a bit to the stuff I'm gonna talk about later on here today. When you concentrate on personal stories in history, you gain like concise focus on things. That, for example, prevents you from compressing history, which you would do if you try to make oversweeping like generalizations of a couple of decades or half a century or something like that. When you actually follow a person, you find nuances, and you know that they are specific to the case, but it cuts some of the bullshit off. And once you start getting hang of how to follow the paper trail, you will end up finding stuff that you didn't think about. So it's a nice research method for history. Of course, it can't be the only one, and you have to take it with a grain of salt that this was just one person. But still, it's a very useful tool for thinking.
It also has the advantage, I think, of being more interesting.
Oh yeah. Human interest story, and as humans we
smell the dust in the air.
Yeah, and we make narratives. We like construct narratives in our heads to like help us with memory and stuff like that, because we have been doing that since the dawn of
time. Yeah,
that's what we do, man. That's how we store information, is in stories.
Yes.
Yep.
But yeah.
Right.
Do I have a story for you today?
Yes, you do. So let's get into that a little bit.
Let's do this. All right.
So, since your focus is in the German arts, what is the time frame for the KDF fight books? I know there's kind of a lot of uncertainty there, and we see conversations around ambiguity relating to the time frames kind of pop out here and there. So, what does that time frame look like?
I was pondering on this question about a bit 5-10 years ago, and at that point I was thinking that Liechtenauer started to have pretty good cover on the 15th century. So what I just did was I took every fight book I could find. That was more or less a unique first copy or unique case of that instance, and I just put out the year of first occurrence and then the page count and did a graph on that, and you could then like argue pretty well that the height of the KDF fight books was in the turn of the century, so 1500s.
1500s. Interesting.
Yeah. Then that's like where it peaks, but where it starts, that's a very good question, because everywhere I go, everybody is criticizing on the dating of the 3 to the 7A, or the Nürnberg, the Döbringer Hausbuch, or whatever you want to call it, because of the odd calendar there. And after that, the first real like KDF adjacent book that you can find, if you count the Ludwig von the Glumides Kampfet stuff that might even come through Konrad Kiese from Italy. That's a different story. Then it kind of starts with Talhofer in 1440s, and then there's this weird 60-year gap between 3 to the 7A and first Talhofer versions, and then after that you get pretty consistently like couple of KDF books every decade, and the page count really starts peaking in the end of the century. So I would wager that the first house book is outlier and probably misdated. And the way I've seen it, and I've been mingling with the like nascent history research discipline of martial arts research that's been popping out just pre-pandemic in Europe in different universities, where these young researchers, postdocs, and energetic professors have been like bashing their heads together about this thing, and they also do agree that it should probably be later. But yeah. But at least from 1440s to the end of the century, we can see that that's like pretty safe bet anyway, if you count the outlier off. But the outlier is interesting in the way that dating this Johannes Liechtenauer person is of great importance if then to compare it where it starts. And there are different theories for that. One of them is that he actually lived like 200 years earlier as some kind of traveling person during the time when the Meisterlied tradition, where you sing these poems about different things, was like taking place. And it's a theory. At least the structure of the teachings would support that, but it still could just as well happen in the 15th century. And my view is that I'd be more comfortable putting it way after Fiore, into somewhere in 1420s, 1430s.
No kidding.
Everything we know about.
That's really fascinating.
Yeah. But I have to say that there's some survivor bias going on then, because we know that the KDF teachings were spread through the Zedel.
Spread through the what, please?
Through Zedel.
Through the Zedel. Okay.
Yeah. So, what it kind of implies is that somebody has been printing these leaflets out and distributing them, and that kind of coincides with what's happening in Nürnberg, where they have the first paper mills in 1390s in the river Pegnitz or the Gleismühle, and then we have these notions. For example, when a fencing master is holding a Fechtschule, they would sometimes hang their swords to the Ratshaus, but sometimes they would just put on paper like note. So they might actually have this like a woodblock printed like posters that they are putting out there. So it kind of coincides that there would be this kind of small time printing going on, that not quite books,
Okay.
but maybe just broadsheets or something like that going on. And the thing is that we don't know anything about them because they didn't survive to this day. The only thing that has survived are basically these presentation copies to the nobility. And later on, when we have like printed books, we might know like what's the print run, for example, for the Grundige whatever Joachim Mayer's book was called, Grundige Beschreibung des Kunstfechtens.
Yeah.
We know the print run, and we can count how many of the books we know of this day, and we can start looking at the survival rate of a book. So for me, it looks like any of the, working at the National Library, I would have the idea that any of the books that end up in a library get preserved way better than the books that stay in circulation. And
Right, of course,
then we
yeah.
start looking at like what did, for example, Leipzig University didn't have a library at the time at all. So where do you put the book if you want it out? And the whole question about publishing during the late medieval times, just before during the cradle printing of the incunabula time, it would mean a bit different thing than during later on, when you already have the infrastructure set out for like printing books and binding them and distributing them and putting them in the libraries. And this was a bit before that time, so we might actually just see a survivor bias of the stuff that was left, but to our days, and the books that didn't survive, we don't know much about.
So we're talking about printing prior to the Gutenberg Bible, then? Is that like they're printing broadsheets prior to printing books? Is that what's going on?
Yeah, like
Okay.
book prints. Like where you start talking about the printing press, and when you start talking about the cradle prints that are sometimes called incunabula in plural, it's actually the distinction is just academic. It's just they just like it's just terminology thing. If it's before 1500. Year 1500, then it's a cradle print. If it's after that, then it's like a printed book, and it's kind of sometimes completely artificial. And there's still this habit, for example, that for example, if it was illuminated book, the pictures might come from a woodblock print, or they might have been drawn by hand, and then you would have like a book that has space for the text and like already like laid out pictures, and then you put the text afterwards and stuff like that. So which is it then? Is it a printed book, or is it a manuscript, or is it a woodblock print? And because this is kind of messy, I think the scholars have just agreed.
So do you think? Go ahead.
Yeah,
I was going to say,
yes, please do.
Gutenberg's innovations were more about efficiency and like mass printing than they were about like revolutionizing like this concept of like creating print, I think.
Yeah,
because it was his inks and then his tooled letters that kind of enabled him to print a lot quickly.
Yeah, and he wouldn't even have wanted to make it spread the way it did, but he ran into debt, and his debtor was trying to make money out of his invention by dishing it out against Gutenberg's will. So and even the movable
and then the
press
Mainz-Session feud,
Yeah, and movable press was like invented centuries before in China. They were just using porcelain fonts at the time. Nobody talks about that because we are so Eurocentric. But, but there you go.
It doesn't matter, man.
But
that's funny. So,
but it often is like that the technological advancements come and go, and then what it means that you need to have. Like you need to have the Edison to your Tesla, basically. Somebody who makes business out of it, then it spreads.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's no good to be the
that's
pioneer. It's better to be the person who takes the pioneer's work, repackages it a little bit, and markets the hell out of it.
Yeah,
Johann Fust was a great salesman. The guy that sued him and took his business, he was a fantastic salesman. He traveled everywhere. He was in France and all over. He actually got accused of being a witch when he was in France because he set up a booth and he started printing a whole bunch of pieces of paper, and they were like, "This is way too efficient. This is black magic. What are you doing?"
Yeah. Oh, this would segue perfectly into what magic was at the time. I was reading,
break it down for us.
17th century Finnish spell book about hunting magic, and for example, examples of hunting magic is like, if you don't like your neighbor and he's hunting way too well, here's a spell: take a file and file the muzzle of his musket bit open from below, so that it blows the gases out in uneven manner, and that's a good spell. Like that's engineering to my mind, but yeah, my boss sometimes thinks.
Let's go with that. It's a spell.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So what's magic? It's just you'll have some sneaky tricks, and if you don't want to like open up what they are about, then people are tending to say call magic on that, and it didn't.
Okay.
It wasn't necessarily a bad thing at the time. It was just like somebody being a bit too inventive for normal standards.
Yeah. I mean, it's the progression of science, just science under a different name, like necromancy and witchcraft and alchemy.
Yeah.
So it seems like, from some of the things that you've said, that there's this emphasis around the city of Nuremberg. Why is that? What is the focal point? What's the importance of Nuremberg?
Yeah, I've heard about this claim, and my own research bias is based on Nuremberg, basically because I started first with something else and it didn't work out, and then with the material I had to hand, like start from Nuremberg was screaming in my face. But I first started looking at the early days of KDF by walking backwards from Hans Lekkinen. And he had some dealings, well, basically in 3 cities, and Heidelberg was one of those. Heidelberg was then the center of the the Count Palatinate, you say it in English, and the Wittelsbach. So I actually started there, but the leads ran dry. But you had a couple of good names, basically the patrons for Paulus Karl and Lekkiner, and then Joachim Meyer were all Wittelsbachs. So I was fooling around reading the Heidelberg archives and what could I find, and it wasn't that good. I gave up after a while, even though I did find a Liechtenauer there also. But then I reset and started looking at Nürnberg, and it was way easier because the paper trail is very thick there. And you have to remember that Nuremberg is at this time the second largest city in the empire, or third largest if you count the Prague. Prague was the biggest, but then Köln was the second biggest, and then came Nuremberg. But Prague
is bigger than Vienna.
It was Vienna bloomed large later on, but not at this point.
Okay.
It's not to my knowledge.
Okay.
At least the lists I've been comparing puts Prague first, and then some scholars say that Nuremberg was the second biggest. Some say it was third biggest. They didn't have like accurate countings, and then there was the bubonic plague, like thinning the crowd very efficiently. So it would vary from decade to decade quite a bit. But yeah, Nuremberg is a good focal point just because it's big and rich, and then it's quite literate at the time. So it was kind of a central for arts and culture at the time, and but for some reason it doesn't show that much. For example, I didn't know that the imperial regalia and all all the crown jewels and stuff were held in Nürnberg. I would have guessed Augsburg if I
right. Yeah, with the Führers.
Then I looked at the history, and it was way weirder. At some point, Emperor Sigismund is like, this war and stuff going on is very putting like everything into risk, and he gave the order to smuggle the imperial regalia to Nürnberg. Sigismund was probably born in Nuremberg, so Sigismund of Luxembourg, the last empire before the Habsburgs. So he was actually probably born there, so he probably had a bit of a bias too.
Was he a Wittelsbach? Because you mentioned them earlier.
He wasn't.
I
think it's just he was from Luxembourg.
Luxembourg, okay.
Yeah,
because the Wittelsbach line ends with Rupert II, right?
Yeah.
But then they also weren't they the kings of Bavaria? I thought, or dukes of Bavaria.
Yeah, they were.
Like
Yeah, like
they actually have like a cadet line that hangs out in Bavaria.
Okay, so the Bavaria is a cadet line of the imperial.
Yeah, the Pfalzgraf line that stays in the Pfalz.
In the Pfalz
around Heidelberg. But there's this funny story that they actually smuggled the imperial regalia to Nuremberg, for example, and they didn't tell. They told only to 6 people they are doing this, and 2 of them were like Ratsherren of Nuremberg that were like facilitating this. But for example, the carriage driver didn't know. He was thinking he was transporting fish because it was basically a smuggling operation that was made to look like a just.
This sounds like a cool story. So do we have like a firsthand? We have accounts of this then?
Yeah. It's in the both in the City Chronicles and I think in the documents of Sigismund. I found this in a 19th century history book. Like Germans were very much into public.
If we go north of the Alps, Josh, we got to do this. I love all these great stories.
Yeah, they're all in Google Book and OCR, so it's awesome to start reading this. So it was really crazy. What they've had in the fish cart, so to speak, was, for example, the spear of Longinus. And set of silk velvet clothes for the emperor, and of course the crown and everything. And then when they arrived to Nuremberg, then they realized what this was, and they had held like big celebration for it. And they mentioned awesome. That the driver was like almost fainting and he fell on the ground. No, don't do that to me.
And then plus he got busted as a smuggler because he thought he was smuggling fish.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Some true Han Solo action there. Yeah. Oh man, I'm on the good side. Oh no.
Yeah, but Nuremberg wasn't, for example, it wasn't a military might at the time. They might want to think they were. Everybody who's researching into citizen militia would say that Nurembergs were kick-ass. But when you look at their role in the Hussite War, for example, they took part a couple of times and they got their ass kicked. Basically, at the first sight of trouble, the German crusade troops were fleeing, and Nuremberg. They didn't have
citizen militias don't seem to be useful outside city walls. They seem good for that. The moment they get outside that, no, forget it.
Yeah. You probably want to have like heavy cavalry still for that.
Yeah.
But the Nurembergers were providing, there was like light cavalry and handguns and crossbows, basically. But for some reason they weren't made for field battle at this point. But then the city itself was quite impressive, and it was quite rich. So second time they had to flee from the Hussites. Then now I forgot the name of the Hussite commander after Jan Žižka. But after him, the one who succeeded him, he was basically on the gates of Nuremberg, and like every children and women, women and children of over age 12 were ordered to build earthworks around the city, and like everybody was put into work, and they were organizing the town under captains to organize into military units in a big way, and everybody had to arm themselves. And they did have arms because that was their duty to bear them. And then the Burgmeisters came with the idea that this is gonna get expensive. We're gonna do a bit of a raffle, and they raised basically money from the craftsmen and citizens, and they paid the Hussites like 12,000 guilders, and they went away.
Wow.
If money is what you do, then money is the solution. And I don't know what the emperor thought of that, because it kind of shifts the power balance a bit. Emperor never had a lot of money, so 12,000 guildens is a lot. It's basically, I did make some calculations like comparing it to what you would get it, and you could like outfit an army with that kind of money.
Okay.
12,000
guilders.
But when you start looking at Nuremberg with the sense of KDF, then the question is a bit different, because for a long time I was searching for fencing guilds there, and I couldn't find any. I would find like mentions of foreign fencing masters coming to Nuremberg and holding a Fechtschule, and sometimes getting into trouble with some other foreign fencing masters, and they would have like a duel that would end up in one way or another.
Quick question: by foreign, do you mean from outside Nuremberg or non-German?
Just outside Nuremberg.
So non-Nuremberg.
Yeah, just out of town. I do have notes here, so I can say that there's for example, from Würzburg, which was pretty big in the northwest to Nuremberg town. So about 100 miles or so radius, but basically not a local. So from the different area of jurisdiction or something like that. So then I couldn't find anything like any paper trails on like fencing there, until I realized that there was a crafts guilds revolution in 1349, and the Ratsherren didn't like that, and they forbid all guilds in the city. Like none, there were no guilds at all. And
interesting.
And this is getting interesting, because at the same time there was the Pope had banned like associations that were of ideological associations outside of maybe craftsmen guilds and like nightly Gesellschaften. I think they were extant, but like you wouldn't even be allowed to do that kind of thing. But then of course the Ratsherren at Nuremberg were pretty adamant that none of this shit is going down here. And this is kind of interesting for KDF, because it was still very much in effect during the 15th century. So you can't find like organized guilds there. But what you will find then, that all the craftsmen were then organized under different Ratsherren. And the Nuremberg city council was built in layers. So there was like senior council of 7, and then the large council of 20, and later on they would even add more, like 15 more like young hangarounds there. So it would then bloat a bit during the time, and all of these would have their own organizations. Usually they would, of course, of the patrician class, what would really like define them was that they were doing long distance trade, which is very lucrative, and these were then their own like trade companies. And then but because they would then own parts of the city, and there would be craftsmen living there, then they would be kind of organizing those craftsmen into some kind of workable units. And there's this thing that usually when you would have a guild, you would talk about Gesellschaft, which is like a common cause kind of an organization. Yeah. But then there's a Gemein, which means that people who are of the same area or same village, And maybe this is more or less than that these are like organized into city districts and so on, and they would be more of the Gemein kind of a thing. But this is at least in the German scholarship, they made this kind of distinction. But anyway, you'd have then the guilds would be the Ratsherren and their own companies and the craftsmen that are working under them. And this would be called Gesellschaften. So for
these are
example,
basically businesses.
Yeah, they're business.
And so they'd be organized. So there would be no organization of a guild based on a common occupation, but they would be organized by the business that they work for.
Yeah. In a way, no different from feudal organization where you have a lord and underlings.
Right.
Interesting.
They just they just made that again, and here comes the power play part. That the Ratsherren were getting a very like what I would read about the big ones like Rummels and the Hallers, which were like really these rich Gesellschaften. They were started in 1470s more or less. So they're probably getting some leverage from the guild ban that was happening like 20 years earlier. We can't confirm that, but it's kind of there was probably this void afterwards, and you start having these really rich like trade companies, and then so they started in the 70s. And then they started getting into problems because the city was basically run by the Burggraf, which was like a count. And and they were having these problems in the turn of the century, so early 15th century, constantly. And then they're starting to buy the Burggrafschaft off. And what do you know? In 1420, the Burggraf's castle burnt down.
What a shame.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's really cheap.
It happens to castles, man.
Yeah, yep. It's like maybe the count was talking a lot of shit for a person living in a castle, like surrounded by the city.
Yeah.
So that happened, and
I hate it when that happens.
So there was like this probably 50 years of like one-upping each other, and then they brought them off, and it starts this really interesting relationship with the former counts, and they would then be basically markgrafs around the area, and the Nürnberg City Council, and this is kind of the ground where you start seeing these Gesellschaft des Liechtenauers names coming up. Some of the names I've been finding from the area is from the from me walking backwards from Lechkynä's time, and some of them is me looking at what the hell was happening in the city of Nuremberg. But that's kind of the setting the ground for why I think Nuremberg is a focal point. It had the environment, it had the money, and then later on when the Emperor Sigismund came into power, it had very close relationship with the emperor, and they were funding directly his efforts. You have these really strange notions going on in the history on what was the deal with the Ratsherren, the emperor, and the money. I have a couple of examples of that. Were highly suspicious, but that kind of sets the ground for why this is an interesting place for starting to look at what's happening there. And so it wasn't a military power at all, but it had political power and money, and it had the kind of organization that was unlike anywhere else in the Holy Roman Empire at the time, because you had these imperial free cities and total free cities and the Hanseatic cities, but then having this kind of strange, very big, very powerful entity smack in the middle, and suddenly like organized under these lords of their own making, who had private armies, and who were not into warfare, but they were into skirmishes and combat a lot.
Sounds like Bologna.
Yeah, right. We will get there, but if you don't mind, I'll meander into these dramatis personae of
Yeah,
of
let's do that. So
Liechtenauer
because you had mentioned some of these that you have some leads on some of these Liechtenauer. So let's jump into that.
Yeah, because first like reading backwards from Lekkune, I just like the first things that immediately dropped to my mind into my face that some of the names are clearly from the Nuremberg area. So there's these like way less known people like Hans Pegnitze. All of them are called Johann or Hans. Really, it's like, you feel that half the people are of that name. But Pegnitz is the river that flows through Nuremberg, and then you have Hartmann von Nuremberg, and I have no fucking clue where he might be from. And then of course Hans Lekkune was called Johannes from Nuremberg a lot. And then so it kind of woke me up to first look at Lekkune, that what is actually his like relationship with this thing, and looking way deeper into the like provenience of each part of Lekkune's book and figuring out where it comes from. You can see that it's like almost to verbatim to Judler's Gentel from Liechtenauer's teachings, and then it name drops Meister Andreas a couple of times, and then you go to look at Andreas Lignitze's, may I say, very distinctive and brutal harnisch and stuff, and that's the same technique done by a dirty citizen militia person. So that kind of, then going way deeper into this iceberg is then that do we have any of the measure terminology in KDF, and who would have it? And then I could find it from Peter von Danzig von Ingolstadt, because he has this Rossfechten section where you start actually realizing that, hey, wait a moment, he's talking about Zaumen, what's that? Oh, it's the bridles. And then I realized, Lekkune has these counterlocks that are called Aussamen, so ripping the bridles. And then Peter von Danzig has like Messernehmen techniques on horseback. What's going on? I thought they were using spears, but he doesn't go into details what these techniques are. It's just the eyed memory that he's listing, but you start seeing that there's this stuff going on, and he would have like Pogen, which is very important like technique in Lekkune, and like there's something going on here. And then I started reading more in the Nuremberg history, and of course you could find from City Chronicles. You would find just people like Hans Pegnitze, but it probably doesn't mean anything because it's so common. Play a toponym because it's this river in the city, and Hans is like the most common first given name for a German man at the time.
Right.
So it doesn't tell anything. But then you see Hans Stettner from Mönsheim having dealings with the city council, and then you have Paulus Kahl popping out, and then when I was reading into one of the big families, I realized that Hans Stahlhofer is mentioned because he was protecting the caravans because they were trying to breaking imperial blockade with Venice and smuggling expensive goods through it. Many people have been talking about this after Jans-Peter Kleinau mentioned about this maybe like 5 years ago. But you can go and dig the archives, and it's you can verify the information easily. You start having these names, and it's getting kind of more and more interesting. Like of course I know that. Lekkune was hanging there out, and I would affix him to quite a many of the Gesellschaft names pretty like directly. That didn't seem that it might have something more to do than just copying books from books. And then I would have these like a couple of names that are really close to Johannes Liechtenauer going on there. And then it goes even crazier when I start like seeing like the grandfather of Ludwig von Eyb. Later on Liechtenauer scholars like popping out there, and you start like from maybe 20 possible names, you start to get like slight hints of maybe 1/4 of 1/3 of them in the city of Nuremberg at this time. So it even though we don't have much about them, just like mentions, and in case of Pegnitz and the Hauptmann von Nürnberg, just the place name, but it kind of starts to put some weight on this Liechtenauer thing. And I then really started looking at the chronicles because, well, they are available at the net. They're quite long and dry read, but of course you only have to read 1 decade at the time. And you would see that for example, Hans Dahlhofer was having dealings with Halles, which was one of the big families at the time, basically maybe the most influential. But then, and probably everybody knows this, that you find that there's a castle Lichtenau, basically sitting in front of the Nuremberg, days travel to the southwest from the town. Okay. Like protecting the adjacent areas of the city there, and then I could see that there's a family called Hummel who bought the castle, and like the next year, Emperor Sigismund giving the Blutbahn, or the like high justice rights to this Hans Hummel, which is the oldest son of the patrician at the time, who was called Heinrich the Rich. And then I was looking at what did this Hummel family do, basically. And I would find like really cool stuff, like Heinrich the Rich going to Prague to have some trade dealings there, because Prague was bigger than Nuremberg, and we basically have this parchment with the seals of every representative of the big families of the town, and just saying that this person is Heinrich Hummel. He speaks for all of the Council of Nuremberg, and he has the rights to deal trade with everything concerning like issues of Nuremberg here. Touch him and die. So that's eerily similar actually to the kind of charter that the Genghis Khan's diplomats had when they were dealing in Europe, like a bit earlier. This kind of this one is speaking with authority, and you don't mess with him. But this kind of touch him and die, I don't know if that's the best kind of diplomacy, but maybe they were still learning at the time. So
I guess it gets the point across.
Yeah,
it's actually.
Yeah, please.
There's something that's really interesting when Rupert comes across the Alps. One of the things that he does, like he's dealing with some Florentine diplomats because they're trying to pay him off to get him to attack Milan. And they're like, hey, we really need you to give us like a guard, some sort of an escort. He's like, no, listen, you don't need a personal guard. All you need is my coat of arms on your coat of arms, and nobody will touch you. So he just allows them to put the sort of the imperial eagle on their coat of arms. He does the same thing for Muzio Attendolo Sforza. So if you see the evolution of Sforza's coat of arms, eventually I think the third iteration under Muzio has the imperial eagle on it. But I thought that was fascinating. He's like, no, you're not going to get killed. But
some families had the right of using the imperial eagle. I have to say that these families, I couldn't find about this, but I could find a lot of drama about this validity of the coat of arms of the Burgmeisters and the Ratsherren, because they were very rich, and I could, for example, see that both Heinrich Hummel and Hans Hummel were like funding emperor at the time, like Heinrich a bit earlier. With Ruprecht and then with Emperor Sigismund, I could see that Hans Hummel was doing that, like to the tune of like personal loans of like 6,000 guilders and stuff like that. So pretty substantial sums, really.
Yeah, that's a lot
for an individual loan. But yeah, in some cases you have this Wappenbuche where they actually have like made a difference between the Adelschaft and the Ratsherren, sorry, that the actual nobility have like a small crown on it, and then the lowborn don't have that. But but the really funny thing was that some of the Nuremberg families then probably paid off to Emperor Sigismund to have themselves knighted. So you have these notions that when Emperor Sigismund was coronating in Rome, he was having outstanding loans, for example, 2,400 guildens to one family, and that family was knighted. So out of the sudden and so on. But rumors were one of those families that basically what happened was that there was on the Ponte di Tevere in front of the papal fortress in Rome, they would just put these four Nuremberg family flags out there for the time of the celebration, to show that these are actually the real thing. These are nobility now, and that feels kind of a strange thing to do, but it was probably due to personal relationship with the newly crowned emperor, and money, just money, because the nobility probably didn't, at least especially the upstarts, they probably didn't have much money, but these that's at this point pretty established representatives of the trade companies of Nuremberg, they had clearly a lot of it. So but what then I could find that I was looking at the activities between knightly combat and the city council representatives, so the burghers, so to speak, and you could see that there was a lot of problems going on with basically the local nobility from the Franken and Bavaria area, like writing complaint letters to the emperor that there are these upstart burghers from Nuremberg trying to enter a tournament. Doesn't work that way. They were upholding a law at this point that you'd have, at least according to like German scholarship, there were some accounts that you would have to have be of noble family for at least 50 years. I think John Chandler said somewhere there that if your grandparents were nobility, then that was enough. So there were probably like variations of this kind of local customs, but they were clearly there to like weed out the upstarts, and the city council members definitely counted as upstarts for the purposes of like nobility and what's allowed for the nobility and what's not. So they didn't have, they were far from equal in the eyes of the local counts. And but then I could find that there was this like clearly this kind of a weird thing that when you start looking at the activities that the burghers had at the time, they had the habit of calling it like ritterliche Kunst of everything. Like when they were having like Schutzschule, for example, like shooting schools or shooting competitions, they would say it's a ritterliche Kunst of like black powder shooting. And kind of it doesn't sound that ritterlich to me, but it was probably just a way to say that this is now of like higher arts and this kind of like bit noble pastime. And then I started following that, are there any of these people who in Nuremberg who were really into this kind of ritterliche thing, and I could see that there was like Erhard Halle and Franz Rummel, the pretty big deal hotshots at the time, who clearly were they were like a couple of those people who were knighted by Emperor Sigismund the day of his coronation, and the peculiar thing was that then when the former burggrafs of Nuremberg, which were divided between two dudes of the Hohenzollern family. Albrecht Achilles, you probably heard about him. He was kind of a big deal, especially like very faithful for Nuremberg a bit later. And then his older brother that was like 14 years older than he, and he was called Johann the Alchemist. and they for some reason they went to pilgrimage at the same time that the bubonic plague was outbursting again at the time, and this was just around the end of the Hussite War, where they probably were not the most popular military commanders at the time because things haven't been going too well for them. So they decided to go to Jerusalem, and what actually happened, they started the pilgrimage in Nuremberg, and then a couple of these upstarts pitched in and accompanied them then through the journey. First over the Alps to Venice, and then with a boat, like skirting Greece and going to Crete and then going to Jerusalem, and then they came back from there. And it's kind of interesting then to realize that the first things they were trying to do after that is like make some use of it, that they were claiming now that they were like pretty much into this nobility thing. And you see that, for example, Franz Rummel, everywhere he went, he was always mentioned that he's a knight, and it was Herr Hans Rummel and Ritter.
So that brings up the interesting question, like, who exactly were these arts intended for?
Yes. The knightly arts at this point were of course the privilege of the nobility or the pastime of the burghers, and it probably pissed off the nobility. The burghers were calling their own stuff knightly arts. But
Okay.
then you start looking at what was happening around the outskirts of Nuremberg at the time. It gets really interesting because the local nobility were pissed off about this long distance trade, because when you look at the map of Germany, it's just full of these enclaves and exclaves, and it's like an awful patchwork of borders. And if you go from Venice to Nuremberg, you will cross so many borders and so many jurisdictions, and if you start paying taxes, you have to start paying taxes for quite a few people at that point. And that's actually what some of the barons on the way would have liked to happen. And the thing is that, of course, if you ask about the Ratsherren or the Handelsgesellschaft people, they would just claim that then maybe they are just carrying fish instead of silk and silver, and this got into a bit of an escalation. And the really interesting thing here, and sorry for the segue, the long answer to your question, is that it would lead to feuds, like legal warfare between the nobility and the Ratsherren at the time. And this was very much the Nuremberg thing. They did have their own book even, where they were like writing down names of the unpleasant nobility and drawing their coat of arms there and listing their crimes. So this gets you a kind of idea at this point of who were they, what are these people like. I have my other forays, other hobbies, and when I start looking at this rich tradition motivated people with lots of weapons and money who hang out in their own castles and hold book of grudges and live by the, what was it, next to World Edge Mountains by the River Reich. I start to immediately think about Warhammer and dwarves. It sounds like that's where actually it comes from. The world of Warhammer is just all around my empire. But it's just so funny to start looking at the this group of rich people who are very much at that point into this kind of proud military tradition. Holding book of grudges. But when I looked at it in more detail, I start seeing that actually the armies of the armed forces of the Handelsgesellschaft were like caravan guards were on defense and raiding parties on offense. So they were mostly like these semi-professional light cavalry kind of dudes. You could see them there like having salads and gorgets and maybe breastplate, but not much else. Usually langesmessers and crossbows. Or if they were depicted attacking somewhere, they might have spears, but like messer crossbow kind of a thing, and then hand gunners.
So the rivalry played out in skirmishes between the lords and the towns then?
Yeah, and
okay.
And that's where, for example, the notions of Hans Stahlhofer getting into troubles comes out, where he actually kills one of them like higher nobility close to Salzburg, and then he had to actually. He got jailed at the area for a while, but when he was let free, with basically on the word of the Nuremberg people, he then mentions to the Haller family that he has to lie low for a couple of months in a safe house, basically in the Nuremberg area. It's kind of narrowly escaping hanging sentence. Therefore, if you look at the social ladder, if you are just a caravan guard, you are a bit below like the Ratsherren, and you're way below than local baron. So it would look really bad in your CV if you start doing that kind of stuff. And maybe Hans Stahlhofer kind of knew that he had done pretty badly at that point. So but then you start seeing that these city militia was not the best in the field army at the point.
Right.
It was still way before the Pike Square revolution kind of a thing.
Right.
But they were highly efficient and harassing the knights and the nobility around Nuremberg who had declared feud were not really feeling safe, because they would get then caught and ransomed, and you have this rich tradition going on around that. And then it kind of shows you the idea that what basically the city militia was good for was small scale thing, but and not really this large kind of formations. But when you look at how they were organized, it's pretty clear, because they were organized under the under different Ratsherren also, and each of them had maybe a force of 100. I mean, it adds up when you count that there are maybe 30 Ratsherren. So you have
and those are
a
companies. These are basically just the companies in Nuremberg having their own, like the businesses in Nuremberg having their own little private army,
pretty much,
to engage in feuds with the local lord.
Yeah, well, that's on the offense. It happened that way. Usually it was the local lords declaring the feud that made it actually legal, and then they would then put their using their offense and raiding parties as best manner of defense. But of course, the reason why they were there was to guard the caravans, because the caravan network, the trade network, were huge. They were like crossing the whole European continent from north to south at the time. And what I've been reading was mostly the Rummels, and I could see them popping up a lot, for example, in Italy. And you then you would want to have some kind of you wouldn't of course start advertising that who you are and how much money you are carrying, but you would then have a bit of armor and weapons, and you have to look business, because the appearances at the time of the civic martial culture is of course everything. So you are carrying weapon because it's your job, then you better have an impressive weapon and so on. And so now I can for the first time then I can start seeing what they were training for when they had these private armies, and it actually doesn't clash at all thinking about the martial culture, which is the same where the Kunst des Fechtens traditions springs out from. And this is, you can't dispute this. You know that it's from somewhere there, and you know that these are both instances of the martial culture, but you don't know the context for it. Well, you might start thinking that Liechtenauer's fencing was not meant for armies. If you say that if you see more than 4 or 6 people, you run away. But that's what they did in the outside wars. So you never know.
It's a skirmish war, so that's what you're doing.
Yeah. But yeah, as an instance of martial cultures, they do mesh together pretty well. And they clearly both very efficient. So the Liechtenauer fencing tradition in spreading and gaining the foothold, and later on in the 15th century gaining the official recognition from the first Habsburg emperors, and then of course seeing the amount of money and prestige amassed by these Handelsgesellschaften. And that's just funny that they're from the same area and they have the same kind of name for their organization and stuff like that, and both are clearly low-born. So it's kind of a thing that Carl Sagan says in Sagan's what's called Razor, the tool for simplifying your logical deductions, is that extraordinary claims need extraordinary proof. But this starts to look more like a death with 1,000 cuts, where you see that these are both clearly like a phenomenon of around the same culture. And what I think now is the interesting thing, that I can start seeing that my reading starts to give real context for the area. For example, I remember the old truth in HEMA that KDF was meant for judicial combat. End of no discussion. But when I start really looking at this thing, and now I have to mention that for quite a few years now, is it over 10 years already, I've been running Historical Fencing Club of Helsinki University, which mostly attracts like history majors. So we have already, and I have a very high retention rate of students. So there starts to be an amount of research done in my club. That's like academic research.
How sweet.
Yeah, and for example, then one of my friends, training buddies, came to the conclusion that in the nobility at the time in the Franken area, so southern France, so north of Bavaria, the feud was the main form of combat and training, what they were using stuff for, and the honorable judicial combat was a thing that was phasing out by the mid 15th century, but the feud thing was huge and going on. Especially like feud between nobility. In Nürnberg's case, now we are just looking at a feud between the city and the nobility. But of course, they were having infights with each other. So and then because the feud can be with parties of different social status, for example.
Of course.
If there's money involved in this case, so it answers the questions that why these non-noble people were training this kind of a knightly art. They were fighting knights, and it was legal. And apparently, according to my friend, it was kind of the main form of individual combat at the time. The skills we would need there. But that being said, there were like these old school, like 14th century style judicial combats going on in the area. So during the 15th century, you'd see like 30 cases of them, and maybe of those 30 cases, maybe 10 of them actually result to combat, because of course people back down from those. And then after the 14th century, this kind of judicial combat phases out. In the end of the century, jousting replaces it in this area, because it becomes huge thing. There were like huge yearly jousts around this so-called four state area at the south of Germany, and then in the next century it's more like these more or less legal or illegal duels for honor, and then you go to the early modern method. But yeah, but jousting of course it's a huge thing to do when you consider this what's the background for this Liechtenauer style fighting. There are many good theories that the theory of timing and fighting on the onset is really meshing well with cavalry combat, and then people
Yeah,
have,
kind of the passes, like
Yeah,
Jess
yeah,
Finley's
pretty
ideas.
much that.
Yeah.
and that the
Yeah.
first essence should be like this almost single time counter,
Mm-hmm.
and not like a
Right.
parry and riposte, because you probably don't have time for that.
Because the horse is you're gonna be past each other. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
pretty
that's
much.
interesting.
But then, from what I found is that but it was mounted combat. It's just light cavalry that were
Right.
doing like literally kicking ass and taking names. It doesn't actually clash. It's just it's never black and white. But it's clearly, when you look at the context, you start understanding what is this shit. And then from this kind of feud mounted combat thing with a good sprinkle of this jousting for the nobility, and then this kind of judicial duel, which was open for all classes, but usually only between equals. Then you would start to have this kind of martial culture that was not for field battles, but for individual skirmishes and combat. And there's
Right.
like no disputing that then having like training in individual combat in this kind of environment would be of huge use. And probably the use would of course be that you show your worth by showing up and training with people who are worth something, and you would
Interesting.
maybe have this kind of like brotherhoods or Gesellschaften in this kind of manner. And then when you think of how this whole thing about honor and renown, or Ehre in German, goes. So if what it means that if you do good stuff with good people, you get good results, and so on. So it might then be that it's then just showing your worth in the society. And for the citizen militia, of course, this was a very very clear thing also, that they should train, because at the time, at least, like according to the Biography, I think it was that every citizen between the age of 16 and 60 should do like 3 nights a month in the city guard, and like acting as the police / fireman / bouncer in the area within the city walls. And for that, of course, they would have to either have their own weapons and be able to use them, or have enough money that they pay for their underlings to do the shift for them. But it was still like mandatory. This was not just a right, it was also a duty. And because it was a duty, and it was considered of some use for the society, it was also very much into the going into the ethics of the citizenship, that you should be worth something also with a weapon in hand. And but it would also make the society really crazy, like Texan stuff.
Yeah.
Like you can't regulate weapons when everybody has a duty to have weapons.
Right.
And they are buying into this martial culture, or even knightly culture, where you train with them. So you have this kind of try to take the weapons away from there, and if at this point, well, let's say after 1453, when the Greek writing starts to go from the Byzantium to the Europe, they might answer with molon labe, come and take them.
Yeah. So should we put knight and young knight learn to love God and honor women in scare quotes? Is that
yeah, but it's also like an ideal. It should.
Gotcha.
You have this phrase of young knights. Also, like it slightly predates these Liechtenauer fight books, and it shows up in the master leads in the songs at the time. So it's also a bit of this kind of a phrase that you use.
Yeah, sort of a colloquialism almost.
It might not be literal. But then when I look at the hustling going on with the leaders of Nuremberg, it was actually pretty very much than a real thing, because they were viewing for night shift themselves, and some of them even succeeded with them. So and I have to say that when these young knights emerged from the city council, they did take up arms, and they did become like captains of their companies, and they did become military leaders when Nuremberg went to war. Because of course you have the names there, and they are the same names. So they did kind of in the context of the city, they did become nobility, and they acted accordingly. And it's so, but then if you ask the nobility, they are not knights. So the kind of answer to this is kind of, it depends, and it could be that it didn't make the Liechtenauer tradition that very popular with the nobility. It's a bit of a similar.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's a similar thing with Nuremberg, where they still have the Burggraf Schloss in the middle before it burnt down. The city council built a higher tower next to it. This happened elsewhere in Germany at the time. For example, Trier was a really bad case, because Trier had the seat of the bishop. And city council were building higher churches than the bishop, and then they were actually competing with that. It became really crazy. But then when you look at the like pictures of Bologna, they are not really innocent of this kind of architecture.
No.
It looks like Manhattan, more or less. But yeah, so there was clearly this kind of one-uppance in Nuremberg area between the burghers and the nobility, and you have these strange mentions that looked really strange in this context. For example, when the group of burghers went to pilgrimage with the Hohenzollern boys, which were like ex Burggrafs of Nuremberg, and then the Hohenzollerns, Albrecht Achilles in this case, mentions who he is when he's writing this diary, or his scribe is writing the diary. He mentions that he's lord of this and that, but not Burggraf of Nuremberg. It just says in Latin. So I was like, why do you say that? Like, what's happening here? And when I look at this personal history between, for example, Franz Rummel, the little brother of Hans Rummel, and then Albrecht Achilles, I will go like, holy fuck, this is so bad. So the full story there for this personal history is that Albrecht Achilles' father was the Burggraf of Nuremberg, and then for a short while Albrecht Achilles was also doing that jointly with his older brother, and when they are bought out, pretty much afterwards, the Rummels, for example, are set into the inner council as a Burgsherren in Nuremberg, and at that point we can't really tell what the situation is between these two groups of people. But then when the Hohenzollerns go for the pilgrimage, of course then Franz Rummel goes with them, and there's this strange mention that the Albrecht is not Lord of Nuremberg, and then when they come back there, Franz is trying to set him up as a real knight, and he's like put down by the local nobility because of this. But later on, then there's the first Maghreb war between the Hohenzollerns and Nurembergs, and then there you have like Albrecht Achilles versus Franz Rummel on the field, both of the respective commanders of the units. And the strangest thing is that then the younger son of Hans Rummel, so basically Franz Rummel's nephew, who has been selling off his father's estates quite quickly at this point, and amassing huge amount of money, but refusing to sell the small manor house that was the last home of his late father at this point. Johannes Rummel von Liechtenauer had just been dead, probably of plague, and he refuses to give this manor house that's sitting basically in front of the city, called Malmsbach Castle, which is really small castle. He refuses to give that to Nurembergers, and the Nuremberg City Council tries to take him off him by force, and that tips him over, and he takes his small company and he sides with Albrecht Achilles, like on the eve of the battle basically, and it's mentioned in the chronicles as a backstabber for that. So you have this weird thing going on with these non-noble Rummels that are noble in their eyes, and these actual noble Hohenzollers, and they are like first they have this breaking of their cordial relationships in the start of the century. It lasted for 2 decades basically, where they are bitching about each other constantly, and then you have this short moment where they hang out with each other in a pilgrimage, and then a bit later on they are actually at war with each other, with this kind of scheming going on. We don't know the reason why this Ulrich Rummel really sided, or why he was trying to sell the Rummel estates around Nuremberg to different people in such a hurry. But there's this kind of weird tension that you can see, and there's probably no paper trail about this, but you can see that the aspect of nobility and non-nobility is really probably feeding into this kind of relationship, and it's not pretty. Yeah. So
it's interesting because I was gonna ask. I know that like Paulus Cow later on takes part in the Bavarian War as a part of Louis of Bavaria, like Louis the Rich's company.
He sides with the Bavarians,
right, so against Albrecht Achilles.
The Bavarian lords ride into Nuremberg's help later on, because the Margraf War it segues into. Well, I think that two small wars after that, like back to back, basically.
Yeah.
And from what I've read, the Nurembergers really like the Wittelsbachs, and they like the Bavarian lords, and they have no beef with them for reasons I don't know. But so not all noble were bad, but I do get this sense from a couple of small hints that there's probably a problem. It's a bit of beef with the activities that the Nurembergs are doing is setting up as fucking up the Hohenzollers all the time. And then if they would have their own martial culture and then using the tagline that they are knightly arts, and that as they did, the Schutzschule, for example, around Europe was also called knightly arts, even though it's clearly not. So it was the burghers wanting to play nobility, and the nobles were like trying to hold on to their power there, and it seems to be a feature of the time. And this kind of feature of the time can be seen in very personal level at the time of the history.
Yeah. So, do you think that this Johann Rommel von Liechtenau is Liechtenauer?
Well, the thing is that if he wasn't, then he was really setting up a trolling account, because this thing goes kind of funny and deep when you start looking at things from the point of view of, now I was talking about Franz Rummel, but when you start looking at the point of view of Hans, who was the actual original lord of the Liechtenau, he was the head, like firstborn of Heinrich the Rich. And he was not brought up with the family. He had like a foster family, and which had lots of dealing in with the trade network of the Handelsgesellschaft. And let's see, I have some names here. So the first time we know that Hans was born probably somewhere 1370s,
Okay.
and he ended up going into politics, not that much into the military in the way of his smaller like younger brother, but then having the third largest private army in Nuremberg with 154 soldiers. So he was into something, and he had in his youth he was traveling a lot, so he would be around the caravan guards and so on, and he should be able to handle himself. But the first time we find him in any kind of documents is in Milan in 1394. He's in a local bank, Mayo Bank.
Interesting.
Interesting.
He's like confirming some documents from Venice there. Interesting.
1390s and
We
have a year 1394.
So I instantly go.
So he might have met Fiore.
Instantly, yeah. We don't know anything about Fiore in 1390. Yeah, 1394, 1399. That area. He's like traveling, roaming the area. There's this one case of him helping out Galeazzo in a duel with Bozigat at the time. But he's in the area, and we know that Hans Rummel is traveling, and so he when we look at the dealings with the Gesellschaft des Rummels, we see that they are having trade posts in Venice, in a Fondazione dei Medici. That doesn't say anything to me. It's just all Italian. You have to
the council. That's the ruling council. Yeah.
If I would be reading Italian, I would be still probably the president of the School of European Swordsmanship. Like I was, but I was feeling a bit insecure about not reading Italian. But they had the trade posts in Venice, in Bologna, in Firenze, in Milan, in Rome. After we know that the Gesellschaft was founded in 1370 by Hans's father, but we know that he's traveling around Italy a lot. Then outside of Italy, the other trade posts are basically like Lübeck, which is a hell of a big city, or around the size of Nuremberg. Also, it's actually which one is bigger is up to debate at the point, but Nuremberg is probably richer. And then
man.
Yeah, and we have the families that they are dealing with, and then it's you can see how much it spreads. So in Genoa, where they don't have a trading post, they are working with Di Ferro family. In Bologna, they are working with Gozzadinis. In Tuscany, they are working with
the Gozzadinis.
Yeah.
Okay.
In Tuscany, they are working with.
Can we pause on that for just a second?
Yeah.
Because the knight, there's one specific captain that's in Bologna at this time, really starting probably in the later 1370s up to the 1400s. And I'm not saying this is related in any way, but like Fuzzolino Tedesco, he's just Fuzzolino the German, right?
Okay.
And so we know, especially with like the Bolognese University, there was sort of a German wing of the university.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of trade, and there was like a German district. So I just wanted to point that out because I think that's super fascinating, and I've just been writing about the Gozzadini a lot because they were incredibly powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, but at this point where you look at the Rummels, we know that they don't count up to that many. We know that Hans has like four brothers, but he's way older than the other dudes are. So he's pretty much alone, probably just with the trusted men of his father. And so when we have at this point seeing the Rummel pumping up, you can pretty much toss a coin 50-50 it's Hans Rummel, because then
It's
like
Hans,
of course they're trusted men, and it's like they probably have like bankers in the company and lawyers and stuff like that, but he's kind of the representative of the family because his father is at that time, for example, doing like diplomacy with Prague, like I mentioned earlier. So it's like we know that there's this one young dude like traveling with this like light cavalry all around Italy at the time, working with these people. In Florence, they work with De Bardi and Medici, for example. And there's a mention that later on, 1470s, when the Medici has some problems with their bank, the Rummelgesellschaft also takes a huge hit. So their relationship with the Medicis go then way into the future from this point of time. And they are trading with basically spices and silk and fur, silver and saltpeter. For saltpeter, it's very interesting because it takes a bit of chemistry to work at this point. And Nuremberg, they are really big into this black powder thing at the time. So there's this kind of military connotation there also. And Nuremberg actually they continued with the fascination with the black powder. They even invented rifling in 1520s. Well, it was way ahead of this time. You can't mass produce rifles at this point because the caliber of the bullets is not exact enough. So it's more like very elite hunting rifles and stuff like that. But they even went so far as like invent almost more modern firearms later on. But yeah, then but that's with the Hans the trader in Italy, and but he is in a very interesting area at a very interesting time when basically the knightly combat arts are at the height in northern Italy, with the end of the time of the there's just company, the standing mercenary companies, and the start of the hero mercenary captains, the condottiere, that kind of area. And so if he was any way inclined with this kind of martial stuff, then he was in for it for a good time. But then later on in Nuremberg, we can speculate that he was probably supportive of the martial culture because he was often trading place then with his little brother, who was aspiring to be a real knight. And so he was probably like bogged down with the business, not as much as his father, but then it was his little brother who wielded less power and could organize less things, but he had more freedom then to pursue the knightly arts and become the leader of the Nuremberg army and so on. And he was being told off by the nobility when he was trying to enter into the jousting scene. So I find that this kind of a person, and looking at the history of Nuremberg from the eyes of this Rummel family, I'm not claiming that Hans von Liechtenauer was Hans Liechtenauer. It's not the big jump to make that kind of conclusion though, but what it really gives me is the perspective of a personal story that shed so much light to the culture and the context and what they were capable of, or what they were interested in, where they were, what they were good at and what they weren't good at. So it's like stupid to look for a fechtschule because there wasn't one. It's stupid to look for a fencing guild because not likely. But then looking at the military structure of the Gesellschaft at the time, you could see that they were not, they did get some small unit success at the time. So and then when this has been going for a while, you start seeing, of course, the fencing antics of the local fencing teachers, basically because they are dueling with each other and stuff like that. But this is later on in the middle of the 15th century when this trade starts to pop up, and they popped up from somewhere. It's kind of this. Of course, it takes 20-30 years to become a master in fencing. So when you start seeing masters of fencing, you look two decades back and what was the environment, and then these Gesellschaften were probably a contributing factor. So And then when you look way later on at the paper trail of the KDF books and the Gesellschaft of the Liechtenauers and the names, and you then trace back and see the names popping up in Nuremberg, you start kind of thinking that it was Hans Rummel, Hans Liechtenauer. The funny thing is that if he wasn't, he wouldn't have made that kind of choices by accident, or maybe he was very embarrassed about this for kind of things. Because it could be that Hans Liechtenauer was a fictional character of way past that the other people were just emulating, because that was the kind of mentality that was happening, and even saying that. This kind of mental image of a perfect fencing master pops up in the for example, Pietro Monte's writings, that when you want to think how you conduct yourself and your training, envision Alexander the Great or something like that, or Charlemagne, and attach attributes to that are relevant to you, and visualize them, and then follow that vision, kind of a thing. So it could be that this kind of alternative explanation for Hans Liechtenauer was also a possibility. But if that was true, then Hans Rummel knew what he was doing when he was conducting his business first in northern Italy, and then having dealings with these feuds in Nuremberg area, and then establishing himself as the Lord of Liechtenau. And but we actually.
I wonder if he was one of those guys that Fiore said that he fought.
You don't know. It's very possible that he would have then been bucking the local diplomats and local condottiere about fencing, and some of them.
Yeah, he'd have to try and rep the German art a little bit while he was down there.
Yeah.
He'd want to flex a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a possibility, but yeah. So whether he was or whether he wasn't, it actually becomes a bit of a secondary question there, because just looking at the context through the paper trail that's attached to this Handelsgesellschaft is good enough for me to show that this is kind of an environment where there was. Where they would have, where we knew that the KDF tradition like spring out of. We know that there were printing presses early on in Nuremberg. It was basically the first paper mills going on there, and we know that the KDF tradition wasn't big on vellum, like the books were printed on paper, and I don't think that Zedel was anything other than a piece of paper also. So you have the like material culture there also, and of course the quality of the weapons and armor, like both sides of the Alps at this point in time, was really high. So they were pretty much the only people who knew how to make proper weapons and armor, and the rest of them were just basically dabbling with magic and alchemy, like we mentioned earlier. When you have like technology sufficiently advanced, it's indistinguishable from magic, but I almost like face palm at this point, and saying that this is not what the saying is supposed to mean. But anyway, this area of Europe was getting it down to science at this point. So like you have it all. You have the small unit tactics. You have the equipment. You have the literacy. You have the one-uppers against the knights, and you have the story that in your youth you were traveling across Europe and so many different ways of fencing. For example, if Hans was in Venice, this would be probably at the height of the Guerra de Ponte time. Well, Guerra de Can, it was what it was called, I think, where they were having basically this football hooligan teams just before without football, and like having these events at the bridge, like beating the crap out of each other. And he would see stuff like that.
Oh man!
And it would then that kind of person would say that he in the playing field of a condottiere and seeing this kind of citizen violence going on also. It's
right.
it's clear to say that he could make the kind of remarks that are attributed to Johannes Liechtenauer. It's like you could see where it would come from. Of course, it's not like waterproof evidence, but it kind of like gives you one explanation and one point of view that this is kind of stuff that it could have been. So it's, I think it's like valuable insight into history in itself, basically.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's incredibly.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
So cool.
It's incredibly fascinating because it really just, to me, it opens up so many different narratives, like knowing that we have this character that could potentially be or have influenced Johannes Liechtenauer, traveling through Italy, hitting major areas, dealing with major families that we know have martial legacies of their own. You know, I mean, the Gazzadini family, Nani Gazzadini, who he probably would have banked with when he was in Bologna, right? Of the Gazzadini family.
Yeah.
Nani's his daughter, his oldest daughter, ends up marrying Anton Galeazzo Bentivoglio, and that's the start of the Bentivoglio legacy, which is where the Bolognese tradition comes from. You know, the Bolognese captains at the time were Lanceolato Pacciaria. You know, obviously you've got Galeazzo de Mantova up in Milan, and you know, in Florence you've got other characters that are kind of like big deals, but you know, like as the Medici family and the Albizzi family were kind of like coalescing a little bit, and in Florence you've got the Bentivoglio family also going to Florence at the time. So just the overlap and the potential for connections to have been made and like this conversation to possibly have happened is just kind of mind-blowing to me, at least.
Yeah, it's
crazy.
It's very sometimes, well, while confirmation bias is well, I think it's old tradition in HEMA research if you look at a couple of decades back.
Yeah,
but,
I mean, that's just
we all know those times, but it gives you a bit of like a boost of during this kind of how to say buttock numbing hobby of going through archives and looking at names and looking at the history and looking up like trolling through like the scholarship of past few decades on the politics of the area. And then you have some bit of fun from it. And what I've gathered, actually, at least speaking of confirmation bias, that when you look at history researchers and their findings of the same phenomena of the same area, they all carry some kind of bias and point of view, and they do color their research with that like almost every time. And
of course
these days, when maybe with the internet and the archives being easily available for every researcher, you have a bit of less of this like hagiographical kind of history writing where you have these characters and the history researchers like attach a lot of like fictional claims that at least they don't provide any proof for. And,
sure.
And, as long as we don't do that, then we are at least better than like late 20th century scholarship. But then, for example, truth be told, now that there is like this up and coming research discipline on like the martial culture and the like martial arts studies and the whole bunch of German-speaking world scholarship on history of Germany, it does set a very high bar for us, and we us like hobbyists. I consider myself hobbyist, even though I'm kind of also standing on shoulders of giants, so to speak. But also I'm very in a nice place in my own life because I'm doing a white collar job at the institution that basically has this access to basically whatever I would need to arrange for myself for this kind of thing. And the really strange thing is that it's actually encouraged then, because I'm just like software engineer. but then of course my co-workers would say that this is the cool shit, that we should all be like that.
Yeah. Well, I think the cool thing is, and I think Stephen and I have found this, is that over the last probably 3 or 4 years, really because of COVID, a lot of libraries have been digitizing their inventory, and we've seen documents pop up that would have been impossible to get in the United States specifically, you know.
Yeah, I do have a bit of insight on that from my working side, because like institutions would have this their like fundings. The public sector didn't get cut instantly just because there was COVID, and then you would have to use your money somewhere, and basically research libraries and stuff are closed.
So they're like, hey, let's go ahead and digitize this stuff, right?
Yeah, and now they have time, because they would always have this huge backlog of digitization work, and this kind of the platforms have already been sorted out, then the facilities where you do it, and basically open source software to publish these archives. If you start looking at the German archives and Italian archives, at some point you start realizing that, wait a minute, are these all made with the same software? And then it starts really like stinging your eyes when some website doesn't have the same workflow and facilities, and you like start to preferring the certain technologies. And this is actually what's happening then behind under the hood, so to speak. So I would say you are spot on in your thinking that this something that like this has probably happened.
Yeah, because I mean, I know when we first started, which was 2 years ago, Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, I think we started right when the war in Ukraine started. It's like the same week or something like that.
Yeah. Because I think, you know, we and obviously we got better at knowing what we were looking for and how to find certain things. But I know in the last probably 3 or 4 months, we found tons of digitized records that before we had. And it's been a game changer.
And you start to get routine for it, like when you have the facilities, and you learn as you go. And I think it's a very different decade to do this kind of work. From what I remember from Bolognese fencing research, like close to 20 years ago, it's like we don't know anything about Dardi tradition. But these days we know quite a lot about Dardi tradition. It seems, probably thanks to your work and probably few others. But I mean, it's like the contrast is huge, especially when the problem is basically that you have so much material to go through. And but this has actually been a problem previously in like academical scholarship. For example, the Emperor Sigismund, the last before the Habsburgs, there was not much research on him. Basically because he spoke like 7 languages, and so the papers there is kind of difficult to follow. And then if you don't have that like digitized, it's like very, very tedious work to then find it from the different European countries of today. He wasn't basically researched a lot previously, and there was like some amount of Hungarian research that I also like came to when I was studying historical fencing and research in Hungary. They would like know this stuff that was all new to me, but then all the records were then written in Hungarian. But by the way, this is a segue that I forgot to bring up, and they are these crumbs on the table yet for me to show to you. For example, we see that the known single picture of Johannes Liechtenauer. He has this peculiar beard and this kind of fur hat. It's actually kind of it dates him well to the reign of Emperor Sigismund and to the...
Yeah, he looks just like Sigismund in his...
yeah.
And that was the look at with the turn of the 1400s.
Yeah, and so does the pictures of Hans Rummel that I found. And but then I don't have to like put the foil hat on and start yelling hallelujah. I go and see why do these people look like this, and what did they say about the appearance of Emperor Sigismund. This is a dude that follows very peculiar Hungarian fashion, because he his queen consort was Hungarian, and when his first wife died, he remarried to the next Hungarian queen consort. So he brought Hungarian habits and Hungarian fashion with him to the Holy Roman Empire, and that was, for example, the beard thing comes from there. And then when we look at Liechtenauer and Rummels in the area, from the same town where Sigismund was probably born, we can kind of say that, well, for example, Hans Rummel didn't have that long beard when he was young, when he was working in Italy, and he had kind of a fat chin, like that didn't look very manly to my eyes. But then later on we have a picture of him with great beard, but this was then Sigismund's reign, so it could be just the fashions of the time. And there's
that's super
so there
interesting.
are probably many people walking around with fur hats and a great beard at the time. And there were probably quite a lot of people who were not that close to emperor who were then like talking about this. What is this weird fashion going on? But there are like always this kind of you can look at the phenomenons and come up with reasons. And yet, so even though I have like Hans von Liechtenauer that has also facilities and stories of Hans Liechtenauer and looks like Hans Liechtenauer at the time of before the other names of the Gesellschaft drop in like a few decades later, it still could be that he wasn't that person. But it's sort of like getting into this Sagan's razor. I start to get still this kind of weird sensation that this like argument is getting more and more weight underneath it. But then when you have done all the reading, you can't come to the conclusion that what does it matter. Of course, this is.
I mean, at a certain level, what we're doing, there's just not that much information.
Yeah.
And the stakes are not that high.
Yeah, pretty much.
You're never gonna.
Like nobody's
you're
gonna
never
die if we misidentify Liechtenauer, right?
Well, and not only that, but like you're never gonna Okay, I'm not gonna say never. Like, rarely are you gonna find the silver bullet, right? Like the silver bullet,
right.
it might be out there, and we'll keep looking for it. I'm not gonna say that we wouldn't. But like. You know, it's like with our research, right? Like we've basically penned it down to Il Casino. We've got like, the De Luca showing up in Bologna in the exact same year. Like we've got so much circumstantial evidence that just kind of puts all of this together. And it's like, is there a silver bullet there? No. But are we like, is our confidence level in the like 90th percentile? Absolutely.
Yeah. It's so much more security to then think about the phenomena, the reasons, and what's fashion and what's the time frame. You start to get more and more information on that, and it's like each nugget. It might not be that much, but you start to get this kind of general sense of everything. Maybe it's just lulling into false sense of like historical research or something like that, but I think it builds up with the confidence, and when you have like when you have a wide base of understanding, you can still build like your narrow thing on top of it, and it doesn't really matter. But then you at least know that what's within your construction and what you are like knowingly leaving out, so you don't have to like suffer from blurred delineations of what is it that you are now concentrating on. And it's very then it's like it cuts a lot of crap, like a lot of speculation just goes. You just say that because of reasons I'm not concentrating on that, I'm drawing the line here, and you have like reasons of drawing the exact line at that point. So it's like a decision that's been informed.
Yeah,
and
it's kind of. Like when one of those big detective boards, there's that meme from Always Sunny in Philadelphia where the guy's like standing in front of the board and he's pointing to it and there are all the red lines crossing and everything like that, like the detective boards, right?
Yeah.
And the way that those boards map is you're basically creating a map of overlapping relationships between different people, right? And
Right.
like from my own personal experience and from my research, one of the things that I found is by researching Antonio Manciolino in the Bolognese tradition, I found more information about Angelo Vigiani than anybody else. Like I just started finding all of this information that started bringing all these connections and ties together for Vigiani and his characters and like the people that he uses as his sort of muses in his book.
Oh yeah,
And so
he was
like
interesting. He was an interesting dude at the
Yeah.
time. He also had a pretty like different kind of ideas on how to train fencing and stuff like that.
he did. It actually looks a lot like Fiore. I mean, that's Guy's estimation is that he's kind of copying some of Fiore's body
No,
mechanics ideas.
that's quite a claim. There's a big time gap between. I remember when we were traveling with Ilka, we went to Vienna to the local national library just to pop in and like presenting us as we know this stuff and some locals connected us and they opened up these Bolognese books and they had some copies of Vigiani and we were looking at it there and it was we realized then that the people in charge of the collections at the National Library of Austria, they didn't know quite that much about Vigiani at all. They were it was a book with beautiful pictures, and it wasn't a very big book either. And then we were speculating around the material there and kind of it already felt then that it would benefit a lot if we would know more about the context of these things because we couldn't really even lean on the academical structures. But
Those kind of over like sort of relationships building out from your own research that have drawn connections back from the later authors of the KDF tradition, the glossiers, if you will, that ties them back to Rommel or
Oh
Rommel
it
the
does
Rommel family,
in a nice way. For example, we know that Karl and Talhofer hated each other, and they were affiliated.
Oh, we do.
And then we know that they are affiliated in different organizations, and we know that Talhofer wasn't affiliated with Rommel. He was affiliated with Halles. At least that's where he went when he was writing his whiny letters. So then it maps out that if then Stettner von Mersheim and Paul Skull would be then affiliated differently, they would probably leave that dude out. And then I don't know if Stettner was affiliated that much with Rummels because he was a knight and he had different kind of dealings with the Ratsherren than tradesmen would have.
So Talhofer. I want to try to get this straight.
Yeah, but we have this explanation now that if Karl and Stettner would be affiliated with Rummels and that was the Gesellschaft of Liechtenauer, then Talhofer would be left out, from what I know of Talhofer. And then I look at the KDF side of this thing and say, why is Talhofer left out? I have no idea. But it's kind of, it's very conveniently arranged there. That I couldn't, the affiliation I would find with Talhofer is a bit different. I mean, it's just with Nürnberg in general, but very.
So do you
very
think that Talhofer kind of started out in the Gesellschaft and then eventually through his personality and just kind of got split off?
No, I don't think so. Because I'm not sure if this kind of martial culture would have been like a secret within the citizen militia of Nuremberg. That's highly unlikely because they are still like they are blowing in the same coal, so to speak. They are united against their enemies.
Gotcha.
Of course, they have some schism and dealings, but for example, Rummels and Halles were like intermarrying. So I think was it? I don't remember. Was it actually Franz Rummel von Liechtenauer who was married then to Rummel? So they had
so interesting.
So they had close families, but of course they had still their own like different trade caravans and all trade secrets and different mercenary companies or citizen militia companies, so to speak, Gesellschafts.
So when they switched allegiance from the Hohenzollerns over to the Wittelsbach family, that's probably where we get Paulus Cal serving under Louis, and then eventually kind of making his way into becoming sort of the court fencing master for Louis the Rich.
Yeah, and there was they did when did they start switching that kind of allegiance? That was early on, because everything I could read about Nuremberg and Hohenzollern was not cordial. Too much stuff going on. That would have must have been a complicated relationship, right there.
But you were saying like the Rummel family though, and their sort of alliance with Albrecht Achilles, and then the split between those two families.
They were not. They didn't have allies. They were having not really feud, but they were having field battles with each other.
Really?
So that's not much of association there. But yeah, they did have for example, Franz and Albrecht did go to pilgrims together. Of course, there were 60 people in total. But not many got knighted afterwards, so it was a kind of a big deal on that trip. But yeah, it was probably could be diplomatical or whatnot. I don't know, or maybe just some of the patrician families were just opportunistic when they saw the opportunity, and they didn't get told off, at least because they were doing the trip together. But it could be that it was a strange relationship there to start with.
So why do you think that Talhofer ends up putting the Marxbrüder sort of logo in his fencing treatise?
Could be just, the reason why Talhofer was writing those treatises was clearly some kind of some of them might have been memory aids, but some were clearly like advertisement. So maybe it just helps. I haven't looked into that to make an educated guess or anything.
So where does the Marxbrüder come from? How do they kind of come? Are they just that? Because obviously they predate the sort of the
Federfechter are located in Prague, and Marxbrüder when they got the official status from the Frederick III of Habsburg. I think they're located in Frankfurt am Main. So that's
that sounds right. Yeah.
And that's in the 1480s, something like that. So it's a bit later, because now what we are talking about is like 14. In the Nuremberg happenings is basically the start of the Hussite wars and ending up with the Margrave wars. So basically 1420s to 1450s or so on. And there's then this 30 years gap, and then Marxbrüder pop up in Frankfurt. But then again, when you're looking at the Handelsgesellschafts, they're very connected with all the big cities, very well connected. So it's just the Rummels that are well connected to Italy. But when we remember that there's like 30 of them, all different, different with their own sense of agency and their own connections, then stuff like that would be spreading, especially if they are leaving these printed notes with the teachings and stuff like that. So
that's fascinating.
Yeah, and they never say that. They never say that KDF is a secret. Say like Fiore says that he's teaching in secret. Maybe to one or two people and close relatives, but if something bad happens and so on. But KDF is just, we wrote this in an obscure manner so that outsiders won't know what we are doing about it, unless you are getting hands-on instruction on this kind of thing. So they are controlling it, but they are not totally blockading and restricting it. And this is but we do see this kind of structure also at the same time in Japan, where
Yeah.
where traveling fencing masters are picking up knowledge here and there, and then they are storing the information in scrolls with like short obscure descriptions and pieces of basically fiction going. That's what did this deity do and what did this demon do to get you this kind of technique, and the technique would have some weird name, not unlike KDF techniques what they have, and then they would have and handle out these scrolls when they exchange information, but without the presence of the people explaining these things, then the memory aids are basically worthless. So it's not a unique thing even to this century in the world for humans to do this kind of a thing.
It's super fascinating because like the way that you're describing this, it almost sounds like Liechtenauer, because there's a preponderance of Liechtenauer, and this Liechtenauer tradition becomes such a big thing because we have so many documents from so many different places, and it sounds like that happened because of just pure networking and the trade network that this family had established.
Yeah, and other Nürnberg depending on where it's spreading, and that would be like that would give the facilities for it to spread. Let's put it that way. I mean, because we only know that it's spread, and then we don't know how, but there must be some means. So this way we can find one mean, or that we can say that it wouldn't be technically impossible for KDF to start in Nürnberg and spread it like this, because we can see the society structured in a way that would make it possible. And so this is one vector for spreading the information, and then it would go hand in hand with the paper mills and the early printing presses and so on. So if you would want to spread from the spread in an accelerating manner, so it would scale up. And how much did it scale up? Well, I would say that it only spread, but it didn't scale up because it stayed pretty much in places in Holy Roman Empire and didn't, for example, spread to France.
Right.
At least that we would know of.
Right.
So it is pretty like in a way it was contained in the German speaking world pretty clearly.
Have you published any of this?
Me? Well, I'm doing this research for. I usually publish for the people I train with, but I'm actually in the process of writing a book, and this is like the historical context part of it. So basically, what the book is about is like researching what are the phenomena of historical fencing from the eyes of Langesmesse and wrestling, and then I have to look basically in a similar way that's like delineated by Roger Norling in his essay of the work ahead of us. That what are the things that you have to take into consider to like cover your corners, and this is just my research on one book chapter on the historical context of KDF. but maybe I should put it out. Do you know any good podcasts where I could talk about this, for example?
So we have our little blog thing, and you could put something together there. It'd be great to link to it.
Yeah.
I particularly like to focus on your theories relating to Liechtenauer.
Sorry?
I think it'd be absolutely great to have something that says, like, here's the research tying Liechtenauer to a real person. I think that would be awesome.
And I first came up with the like the phenomena and the place names and people names also from looking at the like scientific articles on the subject. But then when I look at the sources that they are based on, they are pretty much all like available sources. So even though the path to the original text was not always direct and not accessible to everybody without university level accesses, I think I'm pretty confident that almost all of the stuff can be just found online, so I can link it people, and you can look at the
I think people would really like to be able to
very words.
do this, look into this for themselves.
Yeah.
That's pretty great that we can, if we have an actual tie-in to Hans Liechtenauer.
Yeah.
Who he was as a person.
We this kind of collateral for me, looking at the context of Hans Leckönen, and it's got a very happy coincidence that it's then also of use for the earlier decades. But but as a bit of a personal touch there, I could put one nugget out for you, Stephen, before you have to go. I have this printed out here for easy reference, because I found this was a bit emotional. Because we have this little brother of Johannes, Franz Liechtenauer, who was the like commander of Nürnberg armies, and who was very much into the knightly combat and the knightly arts in different ways, and people were speaking like highly of him. And he was forbidden from entering the tournaments. And the southern German tournament scene was quite something. It would really get off in the later decades, and they would be like the amount of tournaments available would grow exponentially. But at this point, still having a tournament at your town was kind of a big deal. It didn't happen probably didn't happen more than once in a lifetime, and he was forbidden from entering it. So what they did is that they said, screw this, and they were going to have their own party with blackjack and hookers. They started the Gesellstechen, which means like a citizen joust. It was only open to the patrician classes, so the gentry nobility, how should I say it? But they did set it up, and it took them a while, but they got it up in 14, or let's say I have a memory aid here, but it's like full of mad scribbles. It's let's see. Let's say it's 1440s at some point, maybe 1446. I could find records of that. There were like memorability of this happening in the 1600s, because what happened with the Gesellstechen, that it became the most prestigious joust in Nürnberg area, even though it wasn't the noble.
No kidding.
It had the money going on, and this was then the first time it was happening. And there was only one knight that took part of 39 people, and the one knight he had the coat of arms of two fighting cocks back to back on a golden field, which was the Rummel family. And when you start finding stuff and you see this kind of meek person entering their first tournament, is the only person in the whole depictions who is shown without the helmet. And he has the facial features of the Rummel. I know his face already. That this was on say that he's on Rummel. Two of his brothers were also taking part, but I know this was the only night in the tournament. Probably one of the big reasons why the tournament was held. And you can see him entering his first time in the nightly stuff, looking very mean.
Nice.
And a squire putting the helmet on him, and he's having the full family regalia on. And I like, as an old HEMA tournament fence, I get a bit misty-eyed from looking at stuff like that. When you really have the personal story like hammered in there, how does this feel? Do you like the history now? Right. And then of course looking at then deeper on into the tournament arrangements of the Gesellstehen, then I go back to what the fuck is this shit, where they have gestures and weird rules going on, and it feels very, very peculiar and like early modern stuff. But that's the beauty of history, that it both exceeds your expectations and also like sidetracks them in a really weird way.
Right.
Oh man.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, well, that's amazing.
I'm just thinking there's a thing here I'd like that would be great, like the adventures of, Hans Liechtenauer, or even better, Hans Liechtenauer's little brother that he wants everybody to take him seriously. That's just great.
Yeah. And as a counterpoint also, when I was looking at the list of people who were taking part in the pilgrimage to Jerusalem, because this is not the first time I even tried to look for Hans Liechtenauer on the pilgrimage of Jerusalem, because I did that when I was researching on the Wittelsbachs. But there was Hans is of course a very popular name, but there was one Hans the Harnischknecht without the surname taking part. So we never know. Maybe it was our dude, and he never left a paper trail. But even if it wasn't Hans, like it doesn't really matter. You are getting the context nevertheless. You wouldn't get the context by trying to like grit your teeth and find everything you can from Nürnberg, Hans the Harnischknecht. And this is precisely the kind of research you would do if you just stubbornly look at Johannes Liechtenauer. But when you look at Hans Rummel and his combat buff little brother, then you start finding all this stuff, and
they start finding these other
things. Shows also the family connections. But I found it really funny that I could still find that maybe this is my dude. It's so annoying when that happens. But
right. Well, you got to publish this stuff, man. We need to be able to access it.
Yeah, well, like I said, I think when I start talking about these things, I did mention this. I usually don't travel that much because I do other stuff, other martial arts stuff than him, and I have been like fencing professionally and stuff like that. So I've been slacking a bit with the physical community stuff for at least a decade. I went to Dijon and did this short show of this, and there was the Acta Periodica people, editorial present, and they were like, you have like 3 articles worth of stuff there. And I'm like, that's the thing I don't want to hear. But yeah.
Very tough crowd.
I do have the great pleasure that I don't have a big commercial school. I have a very small club that these days is close to outside people. Half the people are martial art instructors, half of them are like academical researchers. And it would be funny if I would call the martial art instructors to write an article on this, but I do have a great hope that if I only like strut around with this stuff long enough, and then maybe some of my academically inclined friends would then chip in and write something about it, because that's also what they do for a living. And I'm saying that I'm like don't want to step too much on their toes, but I have to say that not all of this is of course my own doing, because I do have a team of craft specialists. When I fence, when I wrestle, and when I do research, and when I make stupid dad jokes, they are all there side by side with me, like rubbing each shoulder. That's like my own personal Gesellschaft right there. So if I don't do it, then one of my guys probably would. So no worries there. But and even if I write something, then I know that I get some help. But most of the stuff I do in HEMA is homebrew, so I start with the sources and we work from them directly, and we make the curriculums, and then I coach people if they want to compete, and it's worked pretty well so far.
Nice.
This of course thanks to the people who were instructing me to do this kind of thing. But so I'm not here alone, and there will be something eventually. Probably doesn't take even that long.
Awesome.
Because, for example, I have to say that I had to like get my notes into order a lot just for this podcast. And
Sure. Well, good.
so
That's the first step to publishing.
yeah, you always like you note down your sources. I have to pick up my old laptop because it had some bookmarks and stuff like that. And I was like, why didn't I just do it properly from the beginning? Why did I have to be in like open field in the middle of the night in Hungary, like typing this on Google Docs?
Because that's how it goes, man.
Okay, it wasn't Google Docs, it's on Google Slides. But still, you have to start somewhere, and then you iterate until you are confident in what kind of statement you want to put out, and then you can put it in an article. And I think I'm in a process of doing that right now. Also thanks to you. And you have been not a small amount of inspiration now that I realized the amount of stuff that you have been doing. And then, of course, there were a couple of my friends that have been on this podcast like lately during this autumn, and they
both Jack and John.
Jack and John.
And God forbid if like guy starts to bug me about this, then I really have to do it.
So we should talk to Guy.
No, he would consult me.
I can see it now. Two Cocks in Italy. I mean, that's just a nice.
No.
A fun little series. Two Cocks Part 1, Two Cocks Part 2. It'd be a lot of fun.
Almost everything I do, I owe to Guy in the way that he gave me the tools to do any kind of this thing. So I mean, we do have a very warm and sometimes emotional old relationship. We are not in dealings a lot these days, but maybe we should.
Awesome.
Okay.
Well,
all right.
thanks.
Well, it was great meeting you, Yoli.